Hello, True Crime and Makeup crew. It is Monday, which means it is True Crime and Makeup Monday. And today's segment is on the Bender family, and the color scheme for the day is black. Give me just a minute, we'll get started. Okay, the Bender family, more well known as the Bloody Benders, were a family of serial killers who lived and operated in Labette County, Kansas, United States, from May 1871 to December 1872. The family consisted of John Bender, his wife Elvira, and their son John Jr. and daughter Kate were siblings. Contemporary newspapers reported that several of the Benders' neighbors stated that they claimed to be married, possibly a common law marriage. While there is no definitive number, estimates report that the Benders killed at least a dozen travelers before their crimes were discovered. The fate of the family remains unknown, with theories ranging from a lynching of the family to a successful escape. Much folklore and legend surrounds the Benders, making it difficult to separate fact from fiction. In October 1870, 5 families of spiritualists homesteaded in and around the township of Osage and northwestern Labette County. Approximately 7 miles several miles northeast of where Cherryville was established 7 months later. One of the families was John Bender Sr. and John Bender Jr., who registered 160 acres of land located adjacent to the Great Osage Trail, which was then only open road for traveling further west. After a cabin, a barn with a corral, and a well were built in the fall of 1871, Elvira Bender and her daughter Kate arrived, and the cabin was divided into 2 rooms by a canvas wagon cover. The Benders used the smaller room at the rear for living quarters, while the front room was converted into a general store where a few dry goods were sold. The front section also contained the kitchen and dining table, where travelers could stop for a meal or even spend the night. Elvira and Kate Bender also planted a 2-acre vegetable garden, an apple orchard north of the cabin. John Bender Sr. was around 60 years old and spoke little English. What little he did speak was so guttural that it was usually unintelligible. According to the May 23, 1873 edition of the Emporia News, he was identified with the name of William Bender. Elvira Bender, who also allegedly spoke very little English, was 55 years old and so unfriendly that her neighbors took to calling her a she-devil. I mean, I can't really blame her. I'm antisocial myself, but I can't really say that that's not the way to go. If you don't want people in your business, you don't be friendly, right? Although I'm very friendly, but I think that's more out of anxiety than actual desire to be friendly. John Bender Jr. was around 25 years old and handsome, with auburn hair and a mustache, and spoke English fluently with a German accent. John was prone to laughing aimlessly, which led many to consider him a half-wit, old term for mentally disabled. Kate Bender, who was around 23, was cultivated and attractive and spoke English well, with little accent. A self-proclaimed healer and psychic, she distributed flyers advertising her supernatural powers and her ability to cure illnesses. I was not able to find anything that like definitively said that she was actually able to do any of this. She just may have had like a more modern take on like medicine and stuff, because you gotta remember this is the 1800s, but or more up to date. I shouldn't say modern, but more up to date version of like medication and whatnot. But I couldn't find anything definitive that said whether that was just a ruse to get people to come to the inn to be murdered, or if she actually had said abilities. I genuinely could not find anything. She also conducted seances and gave lectures on spiritualism, for which she gained notoriety for advocating free love. Kate's popularity became a large attraction for the Benders Inn. Although the elder Benders kept to themselves, Kate and her brother regularly attended Sunday school in nearby Harmony Grove. The Benders were widely believed to be German immigrants. No documentation or definitive proof of their relationships to one another or where they were born has ever been found. So there is, on one particular site that I looked at, there is speculation that the children are not actually related to the elder Benders at all. That they were like maybe kidnap victims or something like that, but there's really nothing to back that up. John Bender Sr. was from either Germany, Norway, or the Netherlands, and may have been born to John Flickinger. According to contemporary newspapers, Elvira was born Elmira Hill Mark, often misreported as Melk. In the Adirondack Mountains, she married Simon Mark, with whom she claimed to have had 11 children. Later, she married William Stephen Griffith. Elmira was rumored to have murdered several husbands, but none of the rumors was ever proven. Some of the Bender's neighbors claimed that John and Kate were not brother and sister, but actually husband and wife. From those who knew them and have written about the Benders, they say the old man was a repulsive, hideous brute without a redeeming trait, dirty, profane, and ill-tempered. Sounds like most elderly men I know. I mean, that sounds like men in general, but I mean, elderly men especially have, like, no cares about their behavior or the way that they act. So, like, I feel like this is not new. Like, this is just the way that it's been all their lives. If that makes any sense. So I don't feel like that's news. The old Mrs. Bender was a dirty old Dutch crone. Which, again, I feel like you can't even call her Dutch because we don't know where they're from or where they were born or anything like that. We just know they were immigrants, but she was often described as a dirty old Dutch crone. Her face was a fit picture of the midnight hag that wove the spell murderous ambition about the soul of Macbeth. Young Bender, seen when excited, recalled the grave-robbing hyena at once to mind. Kate proclaimed herself responsible to no one but herself. Way to go, Kate. Independent women are, like, a big thing, but that was not a commonplace thing back then, so she would have been considered unusual for that. She professed to be a medium of spiritualism. Kate professed to be a medium of spiritualism and delivered lectures on that subject. In her lectures, she publicly declared that murder might be a dictation for good, that in what the world might deem villainy, her soul might read bravery, nobility, and humanity. She advocated free love and denounced all social regulations for the promotion of purity and the prevention of carnality, which she called miserable requirements of self-constituted society. It's a lot. she maintained carnal relations with her brother and boldly proclaimed her right to do so in the following words found in her lecture manuscript. Quote, "Shall we confine ourselves to a single love and deny our natures their proper sway? Even though it's a brother's passion for his own sister, I say it should not be smothered." End quote. In May of 1871, the body of a man named Jones, who had his skull crushed and his throat cut, which was like, you'll hear me mention that they do that a lot. That was like their MO. Their modus operandi, however you say it. Sorry, this is hard to do and talk at the same time, so... Hey. Was discovered in Drum Creek. The owner of the Drum Creek claim was suspected, but no action was taken. In February 1872, I forgot something upstairs, but that's okay. Reports of missing people who had passed through the area had become so common that travelers began to avoid the trail, which really didn't help them because they were being killed before they ever even gotten to the trail. Like, they were getting them before they ever even went on the trail. And because they were right before you got to this trail is where they were located. So avoiding the trail really didn't help unless you avoided all of the inns nearby the trail, which of course nobody did because nobody would think, you know, they were thinking they were being killed by like animals or robbers and thieves and shit like that. But they weren't. The area was already widely known for horse thieves and villains, and vigilance committees often arrested some for the disappearances, only for them to be later released by the authorities. Many innocent men under suspicion were also run out of the country by these committees. In the winter of 1872, George Newton Longcore left Independence, Kansas, with his infant daughter Mary Ann to resettle in Iowa. I'm going to go off camera to do my eyeliners real quick, and I'll be right back. They were never seen again. In the spring of 1873, Longcore's former neighbor, Dr. William Henry York, went looking for them and questioned homesteaders along the trail. Dr. York reached Fort Scott and on March 9th began the return journey to Independence, but never arrived. Well, yeah, if you go questioning them, they might take you out because they don't want to get caught yet. But nobody, in any research I did, definitively said that they thought the Benders had anything to do with the disappearance of Dr. York. I mean, it's kind of, you know, probable. Because who else, you know? Dr. York had two brothers, Ed York, living in Fort Scott, and Colonel Alexander M. York, a Civil War veteran. Lawyer and member of the Kansas State Senate from Independence, who in November 1872 had been instrumental in exposing U.S. Senator Samuel C. Pomeroy's bribery of state legislators in his bid for re-election. So he was a whistleblower. I think there might have been some speculation that he thought that people killed his brother and his niece to get back at him for that, but I'm sorry, no. There was speculation that somebody had killed his brother for shit. Sorry, that was my dogs. Leave the damn cats alone. All of you. Both knew of William's travel plans, and when he failed to return, an all-out search began for the missing doctor. Colonel York, leading a company of some 50 men, questioned every traveler along the trail and visited all the area homesteads. On March 28th, 1873, Colonel York arrived at the Benders' Inn with him. Mr. Johnson explained to them that his brother had gone missing and asked if they had seen him. They admitted Dr. York had stayed with them and suggested the possibility that he had run into trouble with Indians. Colonel York agreed. And stayed and remained for dinner. On April 3rd, Colonel York returned to the inn with armed men. After being informed that a woman had fled from the inn after Elvira Bender had threatened her with knives. Elvira allegedly could not understand English, while the younger Benders denied the claim. When York repeated the claim, Elvira became enraged, said the woman was a witch who had cursed her coffee, and ordered the men to leave her house, revealing for the first time that her sense of the English language was much better than was let on. Before York left, Kate asked him to return alone the following Friday night, and she would use her clairvoyant abilities to help him find his brother. The men with York were convinced the Benders and the neighboring family, the Roaches, were guilty and wanted to hang them all, but York insisted that evidence must be found. Despite York's strong suspicions regarding the Benders since his visit several weeks earlier, no one had watched them, and it was not noticed for several days that they had fled. They found the cabin empty of food, clothing, and personal possessions. A bad odor was noticed and traced to a trapdoor underneath a bed nailed shut. After opening the trap, the party found clotted blood on the floor of the empty room underneath, 6 feet deep and 7 feet square at the top by 3 feet square at the bottom. They broke up the stone slab floor with sledgehammers but found no bodies and determined that the smell was from blood that had soaked into the soil. The men then physically lifted the cabin and moved it to the side to dig under it, but no bodies were found. They then probed the ground around the cabin with a metal rod, especially in the disturbed soil of the vegetable garden and orchard, where Dr. York's body was found later that evening, buried face down with his feet barely below the surface. The probing continued until midnight, with another 9 suspected grave sites marked before the men were satisfied they had found them all and retired for the night. The next morning, another 8 bodies were found in 7 of the 9 suspected graves, while 1 was found in the well, along with a number of body parts. All but 1 had their heads bashed with a hammer and throats cut, and newspapers reported that all were indecently mutilated. The body of a young girl was found with no injuries sufficient to cause death. It was speculated that she had been strangled or buried alive. State Senator Alexander York offered a $1,000, $22,619 as of 2022, reward for the family's arrest. On May 17th, Kansas Governor Thomas A. Osborne offered a $2,000, $45,239 as of 2022, reward for the apprehension of all 4. Several weeks after the discovery of the bodies, Addison Roach and his son-in-law William Buxton were arrested as accessories. In total, 12 men of bad repute in general would be arrested, including Brockman. All had been involved in disposing of the victim's stolen goods, with Mitt Cherry, a member of the Vigilance Committee, implicated for forging a letter from one of the victims. Brockman would be arrested again 23 years later for the rape and murder of his own 18-year-old daughter. that was today's segment on the Bender family, aka the Bloody Benders. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed doing makeup with me. This was color black. And I will see you all tomorrow. Please keep in mind that I will not be here the 5th or the 6th. There will be no segments. But hopefully I'll be back after that. I will definitely be checking in to let you know. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, join our Facebook group, check us out on Twitter. We are everywhere. And as always, be cautiously kind to others. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, and do what's best for you. Have a wonderful day. Bye.